As the retrieval process is taking place at the Stilfontein mine in the northwest, let's look at the risks under which the miners and rescue workers operate. I'm now joined by mining engineer Dr Adwoa Boaduo Issaka. A very good afternoon to you, Doc. Thank you very much for your time. I mean, it's been fascinating to watch. First, it was, of course, the community in their small but very determined way trying to help get those people underground. It's been a very difficult task, but now with the state deploying resources there, we're seeing record numbers of people coming to the surface. As a mining engineer looking at what has been happening there, just how difficult is that task?
So it's very difficult. Any mine rescue effort is difficult. It endangers the team, the proto team that's conducting the rescuing, as well as the people that are trapped. So just to answer it in short, it's a very difficult task, and it's very high risk, which is why the proto or the mine rescue service is, pretty much the only team that can do this work safely and effectively.
Of course, I mean, when the community members who've been trying to help put their own lives at risk, they were not bothered by the dangers because they felt that they needed to come in and help. Talk us through the considerations if you had to take the decision of deploying people to help there. What would have been your primary considerations?
Okay, so first of all, it's important. If I were to look at it, the first thing you would have to do is assess the environment in which you're going to conduct the rescue. First of all, I think we already have an understanding of where they are, the location of the miners, and then it's to understand how to get to where they are. So you would eventually, or essentially have a look at any existing mine plans, if they're even there. I think this mine closed somewhere in 1992. If there are any mine plans, you have a look at the mine plans to understand the geological conditions, the existing infrastructure, where they could potentially be. And then, obviously, after you've located the miners, then you have to, this this assessment also involves looking at safety. How do you keep the people who are going safe, and what do you need in order to keep them safe? So just in summary, the first step, you assess the safety, and then you put in some relevant controls to make sure that people don't lose their lives in this rescue process. And then you deploy your team, which would be your proto team in this case, and you equip them with the necessary equipment for ventilation. Maybe you'd have some portable ventilation device. You'd give them gas detection instruments, or GDIs, and then you'd also maybe give them rock props and make sure that this support they're able to install, if just in case there are places where you might need to install something to hold the ground up. And then in this case, they also brought the mobile rescue winder to be able to hoist the people up. So for me, those are the most important things. I would assess the environment in which we are taking them, do a safety assessment or some sort of a risk assessment, put in the relevant controls. Obviously, after you locate the miners, all of this involves understanding the layout of the mine, because you have to have an understanding of the layout, and then you get the team that's supposed to rescue them. You have your relevant devices that they need to conduct the operation safely, constant communication. And then you have your device that's going to take them out of the mine, and obviously health services and the other things that you need. Yeah.
Now, that sounds quite involved and expensive too.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it's very expensive. Yeah. I think from one of the articles I read, it's costing about, 12 million rand, the rescue operation. Yeah, it's an expensive operation.
Of course, it still doesn't remove or take away from the fact that the government had to get involved. Otherwise, how else would anyone have known? You mentioned mine plans. that ought to have been the responsibility of someone to make sure that whoever then gets to, whether they get to abandon the mine or would have mine made a lot of money before they do actually have a responsibility to ensure that those plans you're talking about are indeed available, or they do their part in terms of the law, how you go about closing a mine when you no longer have use for it, isn't it?
Yes, yes. So, I mean, 100%, the responsibility of the rescue rests on the government, because many of these ownerless, derelict mines, mines that were closed before the closure legislation was enforced, all of these mines fall on the government. So you're 100% right in saying that it is their responsibility in ensuring that the people come out and the rescue operation happens safely. And another thing is, the literature shows us that this particular operation, I think it's Stilfontein, closed in 1992. And that was, I think our first focus on environmental legislation was in the Minerals Act of 1991. And that's when mine closure or environmental impact assessments were first mentioned in South African mining legislation. So the mine was closed in 1992, which is pretty much the time when mine environmental legislation was or introduced in the South African mining industry. So these old mines did not comply to any closure because simply our legislation did not require them to. So that's why we are having these legacy issues in the mining industry. Yeah.
And I'm asking that because there have been missing parts in as we all look at this situation from different vantage points. Obviously, because the government's attitude has been we're going to smoke these people, we want to smoke these people out. And you saw that determination. And of course, I mean, the government does have a responsibility to ensure that zero tolerance when it comes to lawlessness. But they also have a responsibility, in my view, to ensure that those who were given licenses to mine there, who then at some point decided to abandon those mines, endangering people. And in a country where you have unemployment, there are different parts of the argument that one believes should also be entertained. You should entertain the issue of how you maintain law and order, you ensure that people don't do or engage in illegal activities. But as much as you have a responsibility to ensure that people actually have jobs and can do their jobs safely, you create an environment, if need be, to ensure that these activities don't become illegal simply because you didn't take proactively the kinds of actions that you should have. And one wonders whether from where you sit, I mean, as an engineer, there are other people who will talk about the law, there are other people who will talk about safety, health, and all these other things. Are you aware of conversations that are taking place to actually deal with all the attendant issues that this particular episode, for example, has thrown up?
Yes, I'm very aware. I think I once mentioned previously that South Africa has a small-scale mining policy. And it's important, we need to plan for things like these. We have a small-scale mining policy that needs to be implemented. Without implementation, it's only as good as the paper it's on. So I'm really waiting to see how the DMRE implements the small-scale mining policy, and realizing the quick wins of small-scale mining, because if it's not, this issue is not constrained, it could land up in the hands of illegal syndicates, and which is what we are seeing. And also the enforcement of your mine closure legislation, we have it. It's there. But, we have a challenge with enforcing it on the ground. And, it's not only a responsibility that lies with government. Also, your mining companies have the responsibility to adhere to the legislation, but the government has to enforce. So just to answer your question, we need to enforce Legislation. The legislation is there. It needs to be enforced. Maybe tightened a little bit here and there, but mainly enforced. And, I know that there's some talks with, I know there are continued dialogues between institutions like the Minerals Council South Africa and the DMRE and the various mining stakeholders on how this will be addressed going forward. It's definitely on the table, definitely.
But who is sleeping on the job? Who is not doing their part? Someone has to take the initiative. It's someone's job.
Yes.
To take the lead, isn't it?
Yes, it's twofold. Like I said, it is the job of the government to enforce legislation and to monitor compliance to legislation. And it is the responsibility of the mining companies to ensure that they close these mines well and to ensure that they've got your social labor plans in place, your corporate social responsibility. Everybody, it's a multiple stakeholder function. You cannot really put it on one party, but primarily it's the law. South African mining history has shown us that when the government enforces legislation, look at what happened in COVID. They enforced regulation and legislation, and things happened. The same thing can be done for the mining industry. So again, it's a multiple stakeholder situation. But government enforces, and it's the responsibility of mining companies to comply and to be held accountable when they don't comply.
Indeed. Dr. Adwoa Boaduo Issaka, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hugo is next with your sport update. To stay with us.